morning, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. We generally have, we have almost 50 people, but usually it's like 45, 46. On Zoom, we've got 76. So it's zoomed into a big meeting. But I don't know how to privately message you to give you that information, or to give you, those of you that said, can I talk to you? Of course you can, but I don't know how to give you my phone number, and I don't want to give it to you.
If they want to talk to you, have them send an email to awbroundup@gmail.com, and we're more than happy to forward everything to Kathy that you said. Just address.
I'm sorry, Vaughn, why don't you say that again? I interrupted you.
awbroundup@gmail.com. And we'll just say to Kathy, and I will immediately forward it to Kathy. And if you want to message privately, if you look at your chat, there is this blue bar with names in it. When you click on the arrow and you scroll all the way up, it is for public. It says everybody. And then underneath you see the names. Or if you click on the person's name, the blue name, it will automatically put you in private message with that person.
Okay, well, that's too complicated for me right now. Sorry. But I liked your plan better.
All right, we'll go with that.
And somebody did ask me, the literature that I've just used today is the Paths to Recovery, my Courage to Change book, and the Al-Anon Blueprint for Progress, the new, the new one. Those are the ones I just think I referenced today. But as I started out to say, aren't we so lucky that we've got so many wonderful pieces of literature in Al-Anon? I mean, just so much there. I also liked what I heard, and it's true. I don't think, it was Sherry that was saying it, we do have to be careful with outside issues. I recognize that, and I really recognize it because I know in my home group of usually 48, 49 people, and in my Zoom meeting of 76, people are all over with different opinions about the COVID response and, about the demonstrations. And so we do, we don't necessarily address those per se. But I know in my meetings, we do talk a lot about a level of anxiety that some of us are feeling. We talk about the importance of meditation. We really talk about the importance of picking up a phone and talking to somebody on your phone list along with your sponsor. That to me is critical. I heard somebody say the other day, if you are not living with at least a low level of anxiety, you're not paying attention. And I thought, well, that's good. All right. So, okay. Here we go, and I'll try to wrap this up. The fourth primary idea, where'd I get this? The fourth primary idea, we need to change both this is number 3, not the fourth. Third primary idea is we need to change both our attitudes and our actions. As we become willing to admit our defects, we begin to see how much of our thinking is distorted. We realize how unwise some of our actions have been, how unloving many of our attitudes. We try to recognize and correct these faults. I often say in a meeting or, even when I speak, nothing really changed for me. I mean, certainly those first 3 steps brought down my level of anxiety, my level of fear, confusion, but nothing really changed for me until I got a sponsor and did the 4th step, quite frankly. I mean, that's, there you have it. Because up until then, I was just pretty much calming down. I was just trying to calm down, which is not the same as changing. It's not the same as changing actions or attitudes, but it was just getting to a place where I could begin to breathe more deeply and to take stock of what was going on. I think the beauty, or one of the many beauties of Al-Anon, is that it gives us that practice of self-reflection, which is really necessary. As I said earlier, My sponsor says it all the time. A life worth living is a life it's a life worth living is one that is examined. It's a life that is intentional. It's not accidental. It's intentional. So, although I practice a faith that encourages self-examination, it really has been an Al-Anon where I have learned the meaning of courage, of integrity, of willingness, of humility, of brotherly and sisterly love, of perseverance, and also of forgiveness. That's really where my spiritual growth has been in this program. But I think most importantly, the steps, they really allow me, I don't want to say force, I'll say invite. They invite me to pay attention to my attitudes, because my attitudes are always central to my actions, always central to my actions. So therefore, as many of us discover that checking our motives, I mean, how many meetings have I been in where I've heard men and women say, I needed to check my motives? Checking motives becomes critical. And just what I was saying to Kate, for me, that, gathering evidence really was about my looking good. I had to make sure that if I did have to leave and if the whole marriage fell apart, you would know I was on the side of being right and patient and loving and loyal and suffering. I mean, you would know that. And so that becomes critical for me, that checking the motives. But, I can be very unaware of my motives if I'm not in the habit of literally pulling myself aside and doing a quick inventory. And I still do that today. There are times when I literally step aside and think, what's going on with you? What are you doing here? What are you thinking? I have a friend who lives on the river. She's on the Kentucky side. For those of you that may not know this, I live in Cincinnati, have my whole life, except when my husband was in the military and then in dental school. But she lives, I can almost see it, right across the river, low-lying area of Kentucky, and she gets hit with floods. Now, when the Ohio River floods, it's a muddy river to begin with. But she got hit, and when she opened her kitchen door to the basement, the water was there. There was the water. So I called her and I said, why don't I come over and give you a hand? I've got gloves, I've got boots. And she said, no way. This is nasty. You don't know what this is like. This is nasty stuff. She said, I'm just going to go down there when that water recedes, and I'm going to see what's been damaged and what's still intact. There again, it made me think. That's the importance for me of doing a fourth step. It allowed me to see what had happened in my 12 and a half years of a marriage that was just, for me, turmoil. It was just turmoil. Al-Anon tells me the focus, if I want to get better, the focus has to be on me. And not on the alcoholic. That's what we say in our welcome. We request that you keep the focus on yourselves and not on the alcoholic. When we started to get an influx some years ago of a lot of AAs, not just AAs, but people from other 12-step programs. I was doing a sabbatical out in California from teaching once, and I went to I'll tell you, one of the most powerful Al-Anon meetings I ever went to. I wish I could remember the name of the little coastal town, Cuyahogas. It's by Morro Bay, Cayucas, whatever. They had a wonderful hour and a half Al-Anon meeting there that I would attend. And they did this little reading that said, we welcome those of you from other 12-step programs. We request, however, that when you're here, you introduce yourself by first name only and keep the focus. Keep your topic Al-Anon related. We read that at every one of our Wednesday morning meetings, and now my Thursday morning meeting as well. It's important for all of us, I think, in this fellowship to remember it's got to be about me. It's got to be about my recovery from this disease. Because I'll tell you, I'm someone I mean, I'm someone who honestly used to be readily defined by somebody else, readily defined by someone else. My husband used to say to me in his years of unemployment, you just want me to get a job so that we can join a country club. And I would think, oh, he's right. And then I'd think, what? I don't want to join a country club. I've never wanted to join a country club. But, it's that kind of you're this, you're that. I would always allow myself to be defined by someone else. And not just my husband, but sometimes by my culture, sometimes by a lot of things. Al-Anon has just been so changing my attitudes about me, about who I really want to be and how I really choose to live. It's just been, it's been life-changing, I have to say that. And the other piece is this, and I've said it before, our raison d'etre are the beginners. It's important that we are sharing with them how we change our attitudes and our actions in a program of recovery. When it came to my kids, there are some things, and believe me, I would never give lessons on parenting, but there are some things that have held me in good respect that you taught me. The first thing was never take your kids personally. That was very important for me. Never take them personally. The second thing was, and I think I may have already mentioned this, and that's this. When kids would say to me, "You're not fair," I would look at that and think, no, that's not true. I really am a pretty fair person. I'm really a pretty fair person. So it's not allowing someone else. When I hear things like that, it's a wonderful opportunity, instead of to get defensive about it, is to think about it and think, is that true about me? And if it is true about me, wow, it just hasn't been revealed to me yet, but I'm going to start looking at that. It's just an opportunity, I think. I mean, we're always handed opportunities. Oftentimes, my opportunity comes from my kids. Like this thing with my daughter, calling her an idiot. I will always go to, I will hurt your feelings sometimes for a laugh. I have to look at that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had to go back to somebody and said, I'm so sorry. I was going for the laugh. I'm sorry. If I hurt your feelings, I'm apologizing now. That's just things like that. When I was a high school teacher, I taught, for 20 years, and I taught in a high school in the city that was co-ed. And it was a Catholic high school, which is why they hired me, because I had no qualifications. But I had expired elementary education certificate, but they didn't care. So I'm teaching these kids. I taught all year long, a course in morality and in social justice. And my students are male and female, mainly 17-year-old kids. And boy, girl, 40% African American, I can't do the math. Why am I so dumb? 59%, Caucasian, and no, that's not even true. We had a number of biracial, but we're all over the place. I would hear all the time, you favor the girls. Then I would hear, you favor the boys. You always favor the black students. Why are you sticking up for the white students? Kids. Do you know what it did for me, however? Those kids gave me every day a chance to think, do I favor the girls? Am I favoring the boys? Al-Anon taught me to be able to do that, to examine my attitudes, to examine my actions. That's why, without bringing in outside issues, all that is going on today in my world is a wonderful opportunity for self-examination. It's a wonderful opportunity. And to back away from that, to back myself into a stance with my feet in concrete, it's not good for me, not as a human being. So I looked forward to all these opportunities of self-examination. They're really kind of exciting. I'm sorry that well, anyway. So, that's one time, my students, when they would come in, and I have to tell you the truth, I love high school kids, and I think they liked me too. We had a lot of fun. I don't know how much morality they learned or social justice, but we had a great time. So one time we had a transfer student who came in from God knows where, and he came in and sat down, and another one of my students came in. He was in a bad mood, and I must have said something to him like, don't swing your school bag. And he barked at me, and I said, "Hey, Jamal, I'm not her. I'm not her." And he said, "Sorry, Mrs. Heekin." And this new transfer kid said to the kid next to him, "What does that mean?" And my student, who was sitting next to him, said, "She means Jamal's not mad at her. He's mad at somebody else, but he's taking it out on her," and she's pointing that out. That's the kind of thing that strictly Al-Anon. My husband used to have, and he may still on his dashboard, I'll drive his car. He has a little sticker that says, "It's not them. It's not them." I have to remember that. It's not them. And sometimes it's not me. Anger always seeks a target. Anger always seeks a target. And there are some relationships in my life where I'm not going to be the target. Sorry, it's not me. But when it is me, I have to look at that. So, that continual, what I call vigilance, that for a woman, I have to look at cultural and social habits of being a woman. I don't know. I have an Irish background. I like to say to people, I'm not cheap. It's just that I grew up in the shadow of the potato famine. I mean, we're pretty sure that next week we're going to be eating out of a garbage can. I don't know where that came from, but my mother used to always say when I would be concerned about finances, "Oh, you're so Irish." I don't know. I'm just going to go off to a side here about attitudes. This is without any professional background whatsoever. This is what I know about women, my experience of women. And it just comes from listening to a lot of fifth steps. My experience has been that there is often a pattern in the women that I work with that I've had the privilege of working with, actually. And it is so many of us suffer from perfectionism. And it's not that we keep our houses. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it doesn't play itself out that way. Oftentimes, it's a perfectionism that demands of us that we be in a perfect relationship, that we be the perfect wife, that we be the perfect friend, that we be the perfect mother, a pattern of perfectionism. That's what I notice. A pattern of approval and or people pleasing. I used to identify I was addicted to approval. Those are patterns that I need to look at. Those addictions to approval. We all, as human beings, I believe, and I say this with no background, but most of us do have a need for approval. We do have a need for some control in our lives. We do have a need, for some basic, I can't think of the word that I want, basic needs that need to be met. One is for approval. One's for choices. One is to be loved. But for women in particular, I notice that trying to be perfect in many areas of their lives, seeking approval, a lot of guilt. And the other piece is this. Oftentimes we deny abuse. We'll say, "Oh, you know what? That's okay. Oh, no, that really didn't hurt my feelings. No, you're okay. No, that's all right. No, I knew you didn't mean that. Blah, 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 blah." We deny it. I can't tell you the number of fifth steps I've heard where a woman has really been hurt and she downplays it. And that's a question. Why do you not believe you deserve better? That's a question for all of us, I think. Why do you not believe you don't deserve better? That's a question for myself too, by the way. Those are the kinds of actions, and attitudes that we're talking about. We need to change both our attitudes and actions. because some of them are very unwise, and many of our attitudes are unloving towards ourselves. So I don't know. Before Al-Anon, so much stuff, grew out of control. Trying to, that perfectionism, all that stuff. I like to say, it's like somebody took my character defects and put alcoholism serves like Miracle Grow on all of them. They just got out of hand. In my family, humor is a huge deal. I mean, my brothers and sisters and my parents were funny people. I'll tell you 2 stories real fast. Boy, I talk. This is an old one if you've heard me before. I've said it a lot. When my uncle died on my father's side, it was my father's only brother. My father was only one of 3, which was unusual, but at that time, there were only 3, my dad, my uncle, and my aunt. He had one brother, one sister. His only brother had a massive heart attack at age 48, dropped dead. He was a single guy, never married, lived with his mother. So we're at the funeral, and this uncle had been the president or the head of the Hibernians here in Cincinnati, ancient order of Hibernians. I don't know what they do, but they're Irish, and they uphold Irish qualities and principles, and they steal the statue of St. Patrick's. They steal it probably every March 15th, and then, in good times, it appears miraculously at the front of the St. Patrick's Day parade in downtown Cincinnati. It's a thing. Anyway, so Uncle Murray drops dead suddenly. We have the wake. It's a big deal. I get there, and the Hibernians have planned the whole thing. So it's got a lot of plumes and just a lot of stuff. A lot of, what do I want to say? Not stuff. Just a lot of pageantry, I guess. I'll use that word. So I find my dad. He's at the front of the funeral home. There's standing next to the coffin of his only brother. So I go up to my dad and I put my hand on his shoulder. We were not really a very hugging family, although we did certainly love one another. Put my hand on his shoulder and I say to my dad, "Oh, Dad, what a sad day this is. But look at the Hibernians. What a wonderful job they've done with this wake." And my father, in his grief, turned to me and said, "This is nothing. At dawn, they're going to execute a Protestant." So that's the kind of family I grew up in. I mean, they're just, nothing is serious. My poor mother, I'm her healthcare person. And about a year before she died, I'd been reading these books on how important it is to really communicate to your family what you want done when you're dying and what you don't want done. So I said to Mom, she was over for dinner, healthy as a horse, of course. And I said, "Mom, we've got to talk about this, I need to know what procedures you want done and what procedures you don't want done, because I got 5 brothers and sisters. They're going to fight me tooth and nail." And she said, "Well, let me think about it." And I said, "All right. You're healthy. You got plenty of time, but I really, want specifics here." So she looked at me and rubbed her chin and she said, "Well, I know one procedure I don't want. I don't want to be waterboarded." And I'm like, "All right, to forget this conversation. You're not taking it seriously. Forget." That's my family. We don't take things seriously. We like to tell funny stories, jokes. And I did that for a number of years with my husband. I would create these, it wasn't too hard to create really entertaining stories. But you know what? It wasn't fair to him. It was really a lack of respect on my part. It wasn't funny. He was suffering from a fatal disease called alcoholism. And it wasn't, comedic material. So, that kind of thing for me, to watch that humor. Anyway, this is from past recovery. By looking at and accepting ourselves as we truly are, we can make decisions about who we choose to become. For years before I got to Al-Anon, I'm asking the wrong questions. What's wrong with him? Why would he say that? Why would he do that? Never did I say, Kathy, why did you say that? Why did you do that? Never looked at the roots. And that's what a fourth step and a fifth step allows us to do. It invites us to look at those roots, to go to the roots of those 4 M's that we talk about in Al-Anon: mothering, manipulating, martyrdom, managing. I mean, that also is, I used to tell everybody it's in Al-Anon How It Works. It's not in that book. It's in this one, Paths to Recovery, on the section on the fourth step. Those 4 M's, a woman I sponsor, she said, I don't know where to start. I said, start with the 4 M's. Just start there for now. Just start going through that. That takes some doing. When I look at all those things, it'll help you get to, I think for me, it helped me get to the roots. It helped me get to the roots for sure. In Al-Anon, I've got this, the wonderful thing about Al-Anon, and the piece that when we're together, and even a Zoom meeting, where we laugh the hardest, I think, is when we connect with our brokenness. That's the beauty. When we connect, not with how good we're doing and how great we are. No. When we show up just as we are, when we connect in our brokenness, in our failings, when we know that we don't have to strive beyond being human, when I know I got to watch out for an ego that separates me from the human family, it's not healthy. And when I can share that honestly and use it in such a way that can tell the newcomer that we can recover from ourselves, it's miraculous. That's all it is. It's just simply miraculous. And that for me was especially, I have a friend that always says, and I say to people now, well, whose voice is that? When someone says I'm such a loser, really? Whose voice is that? To identify the voices in our head is critical for me, because it's not the loving God that I know. My loving God never told me I was a loser, ever. But somebody must have, because there it is. Where is that? Whose voice is that? I feel like I'm disjointed and all over the place. I'll tell you this, though. For the 20 years that I did single parenting, that was really important for me, to accept myself as an okay parent. My kids today will say, oh, Mom, you were, no, I know exactly what kind of mom I was. I was an okay mom. I wasn't a great mom. I just did the best that I could with what I had. Some of you know, when my husband was killed, I took all the kids to a grief counselor, and they were so obnoxious. He threw them out. He said, "Get out." He said, "All of them, go out and sit with the receptionist." And they all troop out, And I said to him, God, I don't know that I can raise these kids alone. And he said, You can't. You're understaffed. Best thing anybody ever said to me. If somebody had said to me, try harder, do this, do that, I would have left feeling defeated and overwhelmed. But when someone said to me, you're understaffed, it led me to a place where I knew that God could do for me what I could not do for myself. And that's important. That was important for me to know. I wasn't the greatest. I wasn't the worst. And that's all. But I'll tell you, I have found there was an absolutely fine line between parenting, controlling, and enabling. You said, give them a healthy parent. Give them a healthy parent. So when my kids got into trouble, and they did a lot, I'd show up in court with them. I'd have to get a sub, and all my students would say, your kids are in trouble again, aren't they? I would say, yeah, they are. I'd get a sub, and then I would go to court with these kids. I never hired a lawyer, ever. And even that, they would say, why don't you hire a lawyer? Can I get a lawyer? And I'd say, no. Did you do it? Because if you did it, why am I hiring a lawyer? But I will say this. I knew a lot of people in the court system, and I knew pretty much what the deal was going to be. I mean, they have if they do this, this happens. If they do this. So, I mean, it wasn't like I didn't know what was going to come up for them. But, I would show up for them because that's what you told me to do. I never hired lawyers. These kids are all under 18, by the way, at that time. I didn't have to do wiretapping. None of that stuff. I would just get a Diet Coke, get all my papers that I have to correct or a book. I'd tell them to do the same. Let's get a Coke, Diet Coke, bring some of your schoolwork. And we'd just sit in court and wait for our names to be called. And to tell you the truth, it was a pretty nice time I spent with my kids, one-on-one. Because when you got 7, there's not a lot of one-on-one time. So after that, I wouldn't tell their teachers that, we'd go out for lunch. I mean, it's just what Al-Anon has always taught. You accept what you cannot change and change the things that you can. I wasn't going to spend a day lecturing my kids, yelling at my kids. No, the courts really did for me what, the courts handed out, what I always thought was a fair punishment. And then we would go out for lunch and, then I'd take them back to school and then I'd get back to the classroom. It was always what's best for the child, not how's this going to look? Oh my God, how's this going to look? And I had a lot of pushback from well-meaning friends that criticized me for not getting a lawyer. Forget it. One time, this is an old story I tell. Oh my God. One time I was listening to a radio program, and this was when, I know they've shut them down since, some of them, but you used to be able to there used to have these facilities for kids who were like out of control. And, there was some in Arizona, there was some up in Montana, I forget. Anyway, I'll go quickly with this story. And Patty O, God love her, from California, she's an AA member. That woman, I called her once. Well, I spoke with her once, and she said the most brilliant thing to me. She was on her way to Las Vegas. We were leaving Ocean City, Maryland from this convention we were both spoken at, and we were sharing a rental car back to the airport. But she was on her way to Las Vegas, where she was going to present this paper on getting your teenager sober. I got this kid that's out of control. So I said to her in the car, Patty, what is the secret for getting your kid sober? And she said, the secret is you can't get them sober. You can just take actions to interrupt their drinking and hope they stay alive long enough to get to AA. Free advice from Patty O on my way to the airport. I never forgot it. It was wonderful. But this kid later was being sent away, and I was concerned. So I called her, and God love her if she didn't research places out west. And she said, here's this one place. They do use the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't think they're going to hurt him. Based on that, I presented it to this little 15-year-old kid, and he said to me, Mom, I trust you. I will go. That's a gift of the program. So that happened. He came home. Okay. I'm driving to school one morning. I'm listening to these parents being interviewed on a radio show. Their kids had been to different places, not the one my son went to, but they were complaining about they're using, corporal punishment, to hurt these kids. They're confining these kids, blah, 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 blah. So the host was saying, well, what do you think about that? Oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. Now, I just said they were parents of these kids. They weren't. Not one parent. They were aunts and uncles of these children. Finally, a parent called and said, I have a son, and he's in a program, in a rehab program in the state of Iowa. And the interviewer said, oh, are you afraid? Are you afraid they're going to hurt him? And this father said, no, I'm afraid they're going to send him home. And when I heard him, I thought, as many of you know, no one quite understands what it's like to raise kids, especially when they're under 18, and even when they're over 18, whose drinking is out of control. There just wasn't. Now, that may have changed a lot of places for those kids to go. It's a lonely place to be unless you are in a network of men and women who know, as too few do, what it means to be able to find things to interrupt their drinking and hope that they stay alive long enough to get to Alcoholics Anonymous. Mine have stayed alive long enough, and for that I'm grateful. But I'll tell you, getting there, whew, if I had been concentrating on how does this look, my attitudes and actions would have been totally different. Al-Anon changed that for me completely. I no longer thought, well, how's this going to look? I didn't care how it looked. What I cared about was my child. What I cared about is that he was getting to where he needed to get and that I wasn't somehow interfering with that. So, the only way I know to pay attention, and I mentioned it before, for me are the daily inventories. I mean, I have always found it so helpful for me to make those columns. Who is the woman? Who is not the woman? I mean, it's a part of my personal discipline that I used to. My personal discipline has changed since I can no longer get out in the morning to swim. But even then, to pay attention, to lead a self-examined life. I used to say to my students, you are not going to wake up when you're 42 years old and look in the mirror and say, I would say, I hope you don't look when you're 40 years old in the mirror and say to yourself, how did I become such a loser? It doesn't happen that way. You will become a loser one day at a time. And conversely, you will become a winner one day at a time. Pay attention to how you're living. Pay attention to it. Anyway, so I believe it's really important to make decisions from a place of freedom. I could not do that before I found Al-Anon. Oh, I had to say that. Oh, I had to do that. Well, what else could I do? That's not been anything that I have said since I have discovered you in this program. Making a decision from a place of freedom, that's the ticket for me today. How do I want to be? And then to act my way into it. Sometimes when women will say to me, I don't know, this is what I did. I will say, is that who you wanted to be? Is that who you wanted to be? Because if it is, then okay, I guess. But if it's not, then what can you do differently? Again, it's not about bullying our sponsees. It's about walking with them to a better place, to be a better woman, to be, to take, I hate to say to take the high road, but that's what I hope that I can do, is to take the high road. I used to, I'm going to go back to you, Yvonne. When there are times, like one time you asked me to do a workshop, and I was busy with so many other things that I just think I said to you, that's not going to work for me. And you graciously accepted that. I heard somebody say to me the other day, a woman that I sponsor, I know we're not allowed to say no to Al-Anon. I know we're not allowed to say no to any Al-Anon request. And I said, really? Where'd you find that? I mean, where does it say that? And she said, well, I don't know. It doesn't say it in our literature. I'm like, not in any literature I've ever seen. You're not allowed to say no. This is what I think, Barbara. I think what you need to do, what all of us need to do, is to think. Because so many of us automatically, oh, I'll do that. Sure, I'll do that. Yeah, I can do that. And then we resent whoever asks us. That's crazy. No. For many of us, what's important for our recovery is to learn to say, no, it's not going to work for me. Or even, let me get back to you on that and give ourselves some time to think. This nun that used to teach next to me, Sister Kristen, what a doll. She had up in her classroom this quote. I don't know where it came from. I've seen it attributed to different people, but she taught seniors. I taught juniors. She had this quote up on her blackboard. I used to go in and look at it. She had such a cool classroom. It said, I wrote this down, our true work is to complete our birth, to fulfill our destiny, to live the dreams that free our enormous souls from living a life too small. Every time I'd read that, I'd think, That's the danger of alcoholism. The family disease of alcoholism without a recovery program of some sort will always, I think, lead us into leading a life too small. And it will never be a life that comes from a place of freedom. That's just what I think. Anyway, okay, now I'm running out of time. So, so the beauty about Al-Anon is that it invited me, I like that word today, to see the toll that alcoholism was demanding from me. I mean, in the Blueprint for Progress, page 11, it talks about chaos, uncertainty, and confusion can make it difficult to see the truth. Eventually, what does this mean? Lies ensured peace in the home. Eventually, lies. The lies that I would tell myself and my kids ensured peace in the home. And after all, our only goal was temporary sanity. I mean, that's just what we're all asked to look at. And I think that's why the fourth and the fifth step are so critical. Because how many of us know people who have left the alcoholic, but they're still bitter and blaming? I mean, they're still managing and manipulating and all their martyrs, and they're still mothering everybody. Because what we fight, we become. What we fight, we become. Unless I can come to terms with the exact nature of my wrongs, I will just keep repeating things. And so I had to be willing to see, as we say, that many of my past errors were merely symptoms of an underlying problem or weakness. So being in relationship with other people today, it really leads me to a willingness to do something differently. Otherwise, my defects will absolutely exhaust me. And trying to rid myself of them, even more exhausting. I just try to get better and better and better. No, but my working in partnership, in tandem with a God who can do for me what I can't do for myself, that's a different story. That's energizing. That's energizing. I'll tell you what I used to tell 17-year-olds when they would tell me they were in love. I would say, is your love relationship, does it energize you or does it drain you? And a lot of the times they would say it's energizing. But if they would say it's draining, I would just simply say, you might want to take another look at it. Because honestly, don't we know that to be true? Really healthy, loving relationships, they give us all kinds of energy. But otherwise, I'm exhausted because I'm trying to fix something, or I'm trying to pretend my needs and my wants aren't important. And anyhow. So where am I now? I don't know. Kids. The kids again. Trying to determine what was their responsibility, what was my responsibility. 2 of my sons were thrown out of the high school where I taught twice. They were both thrown out twice. The last one who was thrown out the second time, I had to drive him home. I had to get the sub. Sister Colette had to come in. I had to drive the kid home. And when I came back, I thought, you know what, Kathy? Sit on the steps here. Just give yourself a moment. So I sat on the steps at the high school where I taught, and I had to remind myself, I didn't just get thrown out of high school. I went all 4 years, never got thrown out. I had a great time in high school. My son got thrown out. It wasn't me. That separating, it was so important. What is my responsibility? My responsibility, again, with my kids was working with the schools, working with the courts, working with parent groups, Al-Anon meetings, going to open AA conventions, doing, my work led me to take kids on retreat. We all went on retreats. It was just, sometimes we can confuse, and I think it might be true for men. I don't know. I'm a woman. But sometimes for women, it can be very confusing because so often we have been told that self-care is selfishness. And that can be a slippery slope. Even my mother, who loved me, when I would schedule myself there's a woman in the program here who gives wonderful massages. I mean, she's a massage therapist, and I have I've gone to her for years and years and years. If I would say to my mother, she'd say, "What are you doing today?" I'd say, "Well, I have scheduled a massage." She would say, "Oh, well, that must be nice." Like, what? Why would you do that? That's so self-absorbed or something. I'm telling you, I just believe it's important for us to remember that self-care is self-care. It is not selfishness. It's just, for me, it can be a red flag. And I'm very good at painting red flags green. Anyhow, all right. So, acting my way into new thinking, not thinking my way into new acting. I just think that it just became clear to me after some time in Al-Anon that if I was really serious about recovery, I had to believe in the necessity of changing my attitudes and actions. It's the only thing that made sense. It was essential for me to try and to make things right. And so, that not covering up for people, but learning to speak up and learning to be honest about my situation. All the things that I've tried to do as a result of hanging around and listening to what you were doing. And again, I can't stress it enough, the importance for me of giving my kids a healthy parent to this day. And I don't have time to go through all the different things that I've learned over the years, particularly when parenting. I thought it'd be a really cool thing when I turned 70 to take myself and just my 7 kids on vacation. Nobody else, just the 8 of us. My one son said to me, "Why do you think this is a good idea?" I said, "Oh, it'll be great. Everybody will be great." Well, let me tell you, I don't have to do that again. Did it? Don't have to do it again. It was a nightmare. I don't even want to get into it, but I'll tell you what. What was I thinking? I was thinking everybody would be different. How many years did I waste? How many years did I waste waiting for someone to be different? I love my kids, but my good friend who is a therapist always says, don't look at your kids as a group. Deal with them in small subgroups. That's a better plan. Now I know it. Okay. This is a time thing, Yvonne, and I want to get to the last 4th idea, so I'm jumping here. The 4th primary idea is we keep Al-Anon's gifts by sharing them with others. That's where I should have said. I don't know what your gift is, but it's important for you. I think it's important for all of us to figure that one out, and then share it. It might not be speaking. Sometimes I can harass people into speaking. And then I think, why am I doing that? They don't want to speak. The woman who was like a huge force in our program here in Cincinnati, I said to her one time, she's no longer living, but I said to her, "Susie, why don't you speak?" And she said, "That's not my strength. That's not my strength. My strength is organization. That's why I'm a delegate at the state level." And she was absolutely right. Everybody I talked to that, at the Ohio State thing would say she's amazing. That's what she does. So I don't know how other people are to share it, but I do know this, that I believe we keep Al-Anon's gifts by sharing them with others. This sharing makes Al-Anon the vital, forward-reaching fellowship it is. Our great obligation is to those still in need. Leading another person from despair to hope and love brings comfort to both the giver and the receiver. So I think that one of the most powerful ways of sharing the gift of Al-Anon with others is what we often hear: be the gift. Be the gift. The steps, particularly, I believe, 10, 11, 12, they really give us the opportunity to be the gift, for sure. If I'm willing to practice discipline, awareness, and service. Because you can't give away what you don't have. And thus, practicing what our literature calls a daily commitment. I got to take a drink of water. A daily commitment to continue this healing, life-affirming process of recovery. It's essential. My mom used to say to me, "Why do you keep going to Al-Anon? He's dead." And I would say, "Well, because I'm not." And that was the most honest answer I could give her, because I'm not. That's all. One time I was in Washington, D.C. with a good friend of mine. At that time, I just had the 3 boys at home. And that's where I was taking them on spring break. We're going to D.C. because I have a friend up there. So I threw him in a car. I didn't throw him in a car. We got in the car. I drove up to Washington, D.C., stayed with my friend. She wanted to go to a state park. She had a daughter that, was close to the same age. So we go to this park, and my friend and I are sitting up at this pavilion, this upper pavilion. I mean, you had to hike to get up there. So we're up at a pavilion. And our kids, I don't know where they went. I was not a very good mother. I mean, but they went hiking or something. I knew they'd be okay. So my friend and I are talking, and her husband had just left her after 25 years. She's very angry. So I, of course, am not telling her what to do, but I'm listening. And I'm saying, Al-Anon things like, well, blah, 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 well, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden we hear a voice from below us who's yelling up to us. Do I hear a friend of Bill W's up there? And I'm like, oh my God. My mother always told me I was in a cult. I am in a cult, for God's sakes. It was pretty hilarious. But anyway, if indeed it is a cult, it's one I'm proud to be a member of. So, this carrying the message. I mean, I really believe what is critical is whenever anybody reaches out for help, as we say, we got to make sure that the hand of Al-Anon or Alateen is always there. I know everybody's got their different circumstances about sponsoring. But when I hear someone in my home group say, I've asked 5, 6, 7 women to sponsor me and nobody will, I have to make sure to put my hand on my head, because I think the top of my head's going to blow off. I don't understand that. What I think is happening is that people are misinterpreting what sponsorship means. That's my best guess. That's just my best guess. But that would have to be for a whole other workshop that I don't have time to go into. I understand that you may not have availability to sponsor like a lot of women, but my friend Bill, he always says when people ask him, how many men do you sponsor? He says, about half. I love that response, because the truth is, as many of us know, that you can sponsor 20 people, but how many of them do you actually work with? I mean, I work with a lot of women who have many years in the program. They don't call me daily. They may not even call me weekly. They certainly check in. But anyway, the other thing, beyond being of service in any way that we can, I think, and again, this prayer and meditation, and this actually is my biggest thing, this prayer and meditation. Everybody does it differently. We know that. But one thing for me is a constant, and that is this. I have to be willing to carve out the time to do it. I have to be willing to carve out the time to do it. I took a walk this morning with my niece, and she was asking me, my husband is just such a calm guy. And she said, what do you attribute his calmness to? I said, well, one thing, he meditates twice a day. Come hell or high water, you can count on it. Makes a huge difference. My meditation makes a huge difference in my life. That's all I know. And early on, when I started it in the program, I couldn't sit still for 10 minutes. You can guess. I'm an energized person. To ask me to sit still, it's hard. I could only do it for 10 minutes, but I've gotten better at it. And it's a practice, of course. And since I'm retired from teaching, I've been able to extend it. I've changed it. I've rearranged it, but it is critical for me. That's just me. And with quarantine, I've extended it. My prayer and meditation time has taken on a whole new life because I'm not going anywhere. It's great, but I say to people, just do it. Find a routine that works for you and just do it. You don't have to do it perfectly. You just do it. I do not bring this into meetings either, but I've had a spiritual director since 1994 who I work with. And many of us have outside people that we work with. I don't bring her into a meeting. I don't, I just don't, because but it would, why I don't? It would confuse the newcomer. And we're about the newcomers, it's just not the place. But, my spirituality these days, really, it's about recognizing the presence of God and God's grace in my life on a daily basis. And I will say this, I'm a swimmer. I'm not a walker, but the pools have been closed. And so walking, it's opened up a whole new world for me. You think I ever paid attention to trees? No. But now I'm like, oh my God, look at that tree. Or, oh my God, look, things I never noticed because I'm a swimmer. It's just amazing where you can find places of grace, even today, even this very day. If we're willing to look, it's all over the joint. It's all over in our country and in our world. Is looking, if I'm aware, if I'm willing to be aware.
We're going to start another workshop in 5 minutes. So
okay. I don't know what else to say. That's pretty much, that's just pretty much it. Yvonne, I cannot thank you enough for allowing me. I was afraid I wouldn't have enough to say, remember? And
but
those are the 4 primary ideas. Goodbye. Thank you.
On sponsorship